Okay, so welcome back, everybody, and welcome back to the third session of our dengue side meeting during the UNGA, the United Nations General Assembly 75th anniversary. Very happy with the way the two sessions have gone this morning, the vector control and WASH in the age of COVID and the vaccine hesitancy, dengue, and the case of rebuilding trust. Both of those really emphasized the asset that is the actual community itself and how to engage with that, how to rebuild trust within those communities, how COVID has really accentuated the awareness at public level of infectious diseases. Everybody's a public health expert now out there, and how that's all impacting into those spaces of vector control in terms of vector control activity, and then vaccination programs in terms of developing those from a grassroots community-led perspective as opposed to a prescriptive approach. So very interesting insights coming out of that. And that brings us kind of nicely into our third session, which is driving innovation within vector control. And I'm very pleased and honored to have here today Dr. Derric Nimmo of the International Vector Control Consortium based in Liverpool, and also Dr. Thomas Putzer of SC Johnson, who's going to be talking here as the head of the base of the pyramid approach that they've got for driving innovation there. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Derric. So Derric, over to you.
Great, thank you, Cameron. I'm just going to start up the presentation now. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending where you are around the world. Thank you for joining this session today on driving innovation within vector control. And so I'm going to talk to you today about how IVCC, through its strategy, looks at innovation, but also new opportunities, and also addressing challenges in vector control. Because as we know, vector control is not just going out and controlling the mosquito. It's much more than that. It's about surveillance, it's about monitoring, it's about development of new tools, and it's about innovations around those to help to combat areas that perhaps have not been concentrated on before. Obviously, with the ultimate goal that we're all working towards is the eradication of malaria. Thank you. So in terms of IVCC's vision, mission, and purpose, I mean, it's presented here on the slide so you can read it. But to focus on our purpose, we're really here to create and deliver a toolbox of disruptive vector control innovations for malaria eradication. And IVCC is a product development partnership. So we're not here to do this necessarily ourselves. We're here to work with partners, may that be from industry or from academia or indeed in country, to develop the toolbox that's required to achieve malaria eradication. And so we work on building partnerships that create innovative solutions, which I'm going to talk more about in a minute. And our vision, which we're all working towards, is saving lives and protecting health, and increasing the prosperity of people by preventing these insect-borne diseases around the world. And I'll be talking mainly about malaria and dengue, but of course there are other insect-borne diseases from yellow fever, chikungunya, Zika, etc., as well, that cause their own issues. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of the strategy of IVCC, and we've got these four pillars: one around new product development, one around removing barriers. The third is maximizing impact of the tools when they get to market, and the fourth is operational platforms. So how does IVCC work and build and maintain the expertise so that we can keep the innovation coming and we can keep on innovating and removing these barriers so that we can get these tools into the field and maximize impact. So I'll be going through each one of these pillars individually. I'll be talking about some of the projects that we're doing within each of these pillars, and I hope that there's some interesting information and new information about these projects that lets you know how sort of innovative some of the approaches are that we are looking at. Next slide, please, Cameron. So in terms of product development, concentrating on the first part of product development in terms of develop products to address insecticide resistance. So pyrethroids have been used for the past 20, 30 years, and extensively in control of malaria for the past 20 years. And they've been very successful. They have contributed towards halving the number of deaths from malaria every year, mainly through bed nets and IRS, and they've been very successful in doing that. However, because of the lack of other insecticides that can be used in those products at a cost-effective rate, they have been kind of overused and used exclusively. And when you use a insecticide exclusively, there's a lot of pressure on the insect to become resistant. And of course, we've seen that insecticide resistance development over the past decade, and it's increasing significantly. So this is one of the main functions of IVCC is to look for new insecticides that we can bring to the market that will help us not only combat insecticide resistance to pyrethroids, but also enable better insecticide resistance management. So the sort of thinking is that the minimum you need is 3 different insecticides with different modes of action that don't have pre-existing cross-resistance to pyrethroids. And then you can start to think about innovative and new ways to deploy those insecticides into the field in some sort of rotation or other method of deployment that minimizes the risk of insecticide resistance development to those compounds. And that may be in mosaics, it may be rotations, it may also be mixtures. And I'll talk a bit more about mixtures further on in the presentation. So IVCC has developed 3 new modes of action, insecticides, that can be used for insecticide resistance management. And of course, we're working on more. So 3 is the minimum, and we are looking for more, but we have got 3 that are showing good promise. And we've developed those through innovations and opportunities through our IVCC partners. So this is partners like Syngenta, Bayer, Sumitomo, Mitsui, BASF, etc. So we've worked with those partners, and they've got a library of insecticides that they have tested. And we've now got 3 of those coming through to late stage development, moving into product development. We have tenabenil from Mitsui going into IRS product development at the moment with some field work. And we also have 2 additional novel active ingredients in development with a focus on LLIN formulations, so long-lasting insecticide nets. And again, I'll talk a bit more about those in a minute. So we have a requirement for new capability and partnerships. So we established these strategic partnerships with these companies for formulation of master batch on non-registered chemistries. So we within LLINs, there's master batch formulations that need to be produced for producing nets for testing in the field. And so we are making sure that we have the strategic partnerships, not just between the developers, but also between the manufacturers, to be able to produce these nets so that we can then test them in the field and bring them through the regulatory and testing process to then be registered as products. And then we've also got formulation partnerships looking at coating formulations for experimental net production. With nets, you can either incorporate the insecticide into the net itself, or you can coat it. And there's advantages and disadvantages to doing both of those, and we're working very hard to look at the best methods to formulate and be able to bring those combinations or indeed single formulations to market. We're also exploring dual insecticide LLINs between manufacturers. So in the field, LLINs are deployed for 3 years. That is a huge selection pressure if you're using a single insecticide, and especially if you're continually using that single insecticide over many years. So there's a lot of work that's been done in agriculture through modeling that looks at how you can apply mixtures and how that affects the development of resistance. And when you have mixtures, and these are mixtures of 2 different insecticides with 2 different modes of actions, you tend to get better suppression of resistance development. And so we're working very hard to look at how we might optimize the development of those, not just in terms of the insecticides together, but also in terms of cost and also how you might use those in a net to improve cost. So we're also keeping the novel AI pipeline open. As I mentioned, we've got 3 that are developed, but those were developed out of a screening cascade out of several 100,000 different chemistries. So as you can see, the kind of attrition rate of these chemistries as you go through the selection process in terms of all sorts of things about how they function, how they work in formulations, their efficacy against the insects, etc. You get a selection of the insecticides down to ones with the correct properties for whatever target product profile you've got for LLANs, IRS, or whatever product you're looking at. So we realized we need to keep the AI pipeline open, looking for new and novel chemistries. So we watch the IP situation to evaluate candidate compounds. We also have a big rescreen campaign to look at novel AI leads as they come through. We have a facility called LIGHT, the Liverpool Insecticide Testing Establishment, where we can test these novel AIs and assess whether they're suitable for them moving forwards into the development pipeline. So we have a large section of IVCC working on looking for new chemistries. Next slide, please, Cameron. So we've also got what we call mind the gap tools needed for malaria eradication. This is possibly a new term to people, but mind the gap just means anything that's outside really of IRS and LLINs. It's been realized through modeling and over the years that IRS and LLINs can make a significant impact on malaria. And but alone, they are unlikely to get us to eradication. So IVCC has realized for many years now that we do need new tools and innovative tools. So there was a call for proposals about 5 years ago, and out of that call for proposals came an innovative development, which was the attractive targeted sugar bait. Weston company, an Israeli company, has developed this. You can sort of see it here. This is the bait station. It has these little cells which have the bait inside and an insecticide, and the males and females are attracted to this partly by the color, partly by the odors, and they feed off the bait and then die. And so there's been a lot of work over the past 5 years on this, and there's been some very good results from Mali. That's been published last year, I believe. And so there's some good results, and moving forwards with evaluation over the next 3 or 4 years, and hoping to have that as a product available for the market 2023, 2024. So that's been a very exciting project, a new tool for combating malaria, and not without its challenges, of course, in development, but looking very good. We've also been looking at access to disruptive technology through what we call the Indo-Pacific Initiative. And this is finding tools to address and protect mobile populations, especially against outdoor biting in Cambodia and Thailand. So this is looking at where they've been quite successful in combating malaria, but they can't seem to find the right tools to combat outbreaks that occur when you've got these populations that go to the forest and they get lumber or do other sort of activities in the forest. They contract malaria and then they come back and then they spread it within the country, the village, and often they go to other countries to do this work and then come back. So looking at access to disruptive technologies that might help us combat those, and these can be from protective spatial repellents, my mind's gone blank. Things like bed nets as well. So they have these hammocks that can be bed nets, and so they're assessing a range of different tools that can be used in combination. So in an IVM approach to be able to protect these mobile populations. Thank you, Cameron. Next slide, please. So within product development, we're also looking at developing solutions to expand and optimize vector control coverage, because we're realizing that IRS and LLANs can be very effective, but we need to really increase the coverage of those tools and new tools actually to be able to get to malaria eradication. And increasing coverage generally means reducing the cost, but also thinking about how you do more targeted approaches to use the tools. And so we've been looking at a lot of innovations and developments in IRS and bed nets. So within IRS, we've got some very innovative work working around new sprayers or new tools. There's a tool on the end of the sprayer that can be used to monitor the spraying technique, and it also gives direct feedback to the sprayer on how effective they're being at spraying. So how far are they away from the wall, and that they're applying the product to the wall in the right way. And so we've been doing some work on that over the past couple of years, and that's produced some fantastic results. And we're hoping to be able to share those results soon. But it improves application efficiency, reduces waste, increases accuracy, aids training, reduces the need for supervision, etc. And we've been able to model that. So we've produced this model, and apologies if you can't read this diagram here. But this diagram basically is a model that IVCC has been working on that has taken the PMI data from 2018 and broken it down, all the different individual costs. So for example, what it costs to train people, what it costs for insecticide, what it costs to drive around and transport people, etc. And we've taken that and we've looked at all the different potential innovative technologies and said, well, okay, what potentially percentage savings can these have on a program? And this waterfall diagram represents different buckets of where we've analyzed potential savings and, application technology. So improving the application, we could possibly reduce the cost by 21 cents against what it currently costs per person of $5.85. There's partial wall treatment, so this is spraying just part of the wall. That could have a very significant impact on the cost. We've got the product itself that makes up virtually 30% of the entire cost of a control program. So anything you can do to reduce the cost. And so engineers, this is a program partly run through IVCC. You can get more information on this as a website, but this has been very successful in figuring out innovative ways to reduce the cost of the product with cost sharing programs, and also improved efficacy. So, how can we actually reduce the cost of the actual IRS product, reducing the amount of insecticide in the product or reducing the amount you have to spray, etc. That could have a very significant impact. So we're looking at lots of different innovations through formulation development and silica spraying and electrostatic spraying, etc., to be able to improve the costs. So we're also exploring consumer vector control products. So I think there's been a lot of talk today about interacting with the community. We're also very aware of that, and a lot of products, LLINs and IRS, if the community doesn't understand how to use them, they can use them either incorrectly, and therefore they no longer become effective, or they can do things that really do affect how that product works. So for example, in IRS, you can spray a wall, and somebody doesn't realize later on that if you paint that wall, the IRS product is no longer effective. And so you've got to educate people and give them that information. But also in terms of how consumers use products. So there's a lot of work on LLINs and how people use LLINs and when they use them, and how many times they wash them, etc. That feedback from that can give you real good information about how the community is using those products and whether that's effective or not. And then you can find out how to improve that by the community giving you feedback on, well, okay, we don't like this particular net because we're too hot underneath the net. We prefer this other net because it's cooler at night time. So you can get a lot of feedback from the consumer that can really help in the development of products. We also have a net design initiative. Dual AI LLINs is a lot of work that IVCC and partners are doing. This is around the mixture nets I was talking about before, around insecticide resistance management. And our goal there is to produce dual AI LLMs that are as cost effective as possible, because obviously the more active ingredient you've got in the net, the more it's going to cost, and therefore when you bring it to market, it's got to then compete with other products. So you've got to be able to bring that to market at a cost that people will actually buy and use. There is a lot of other things about cost effectiveness that I won't go into details about, but one of the main drivers is the actual cost of the product. Next slide, please, Cameron. How am I doing for time? I think I'm okay.
You're completely fine. You're completely fine.
Thank you, Cameron.
Yeah.
So one of the areas that IVCC has been very active in is building and supporting laboratories for field capabilities. Now, this might not really gel very well with innovation when you first think about it, but it really does actually, when you go through it, link very well to not just innovation, but keeping innovators engaged and the information you need to keep innovation going and to figure out exactly what's going on. Because innovation is great, but the more you understand about that innovation, the faster you can usually develop that into a product. So IVCC has been working with 7 African sites to bring them up to GLP standard. And this is because when products are evaluated, there is more and more stringent requirements to be able to show that you have evaluated those products correctly. And the GLP standard or certification gives regulators and also in-country registrants the confidence that those tests have been done correctly and that you can rely on the data from those tests. The problem is that a lot of test sites in Africa were not GLP certified, and it actually takes quite a bit of effort to become GLP certified. And IVCC has an expert, Graham Small, who specializes in GLP, and he's been working with these sites over the past 5 years, perhaps more now, to help them bring them to GLP, not just with training, but funding as well. So we're hoping we've got 2 GLP certified. We've got 5 more that should be GLP certified next year. IVCC has also invested heavily in Light, the Liverpool insecticide testing establishment. We have a very close working relationship. The Light is run through the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, and we fund it, but we work with Light and also with other groups within LSTM, Vector Group, and other scientists like Hilary Ranson. And Light has a unique collection of insecticide-resistant mosquitoes that we can use to test against the new insecticides that we're bringing through. So we can check cross resistance, we can check that they work as we want them to, and also we can test formulations and products in the laboratory. They have provisional GLP certification this year and should have full GLP certification by the end of this year. And if you're interested, they have a new website available where you can go and visit and see and investigate the tests that they do. They do a wide range of WHO approved tests, as well as other tests to test new insecticides. And one thing that IVCC has been getting more involved with and has realized recently that formulation and surface chemistry aspects of innovation. So when you change a formulation, when you have a new insecticide and you want to put it into a net or on a wall, understanding how that functions, how that chemistry interacts with that surface, or how that chemistry is presented on that surface, can really inform you as to why a particular formulation works or doesn't. And so we realized that surface chemistry analysis, SEM, MALDI-TOF, Raman microspectroscopy, which is an amazing system that you can visualize all the different chemistries on the surface. But we realized that these imaging systems can be very useful in identifying not only sort of how a product looks or how formulation changes the way a product is presented on a surface, but how that relates to efficacy and how it functions against resistant and susceptible mosquitoes. And that really has driven some real innovation that we're looking at in terms of the new insecticides. They're different to pyrethroids. Pyrethroids, we kind of got lucky with pyrethroids. They worked well in nets. You could mix them with HDPE. They didn't really degrade. They worked well on a wall. They were stable. There's all sorts of things about them that really lent pyrethroids very well to vector control in a public health situation. The new insecticides have different properties, and we're working with those to try and figure out how best to formulate. And so we've realized that we really need to understand that formulation and surface chemistry to be able to innovate and allow us to explore that in a more structured and data-driven way. Thank you, Cameron. Next slide, please. So we've also realized that we've got to keep innovators engaged and motivated. I don't know whether people know or realize, but you know, I think 10 years ago, there may have been 15, 20 companies developing products in the public health market. We're probably down to six or seven now. So it's even more important now to keep those innovators engaged and motivated. And IVCC has been working hard with many of the manufacturers to develop a 0x40 partnership. 0x40 represents getting to 0 malaria deaths by 2040. Which is a lofty goal, and I know there's lots of other sort of campaigns to sort of do that within a certain time scale, but that's the aim. And so the specific aim of 0x40 is to do that with our industrial partners. So to get them together to have a high level of collaboration between those partners, leverage the C-suite, the CEOs, connectivity and support, and also with the technical and other people within those organizations. And there's 3 platforms that have been adopted by 0x40 partners. One is One Voice, which is a platform to inform, educate, and to provide information from the different partners. There's also an IRM, IVM trials platform to look at optimal product layering, because we've realized no single tool is a magic bullet, and we're going to need to be able to combine tools to effectively control malaria. So we want to work on how we might optimize that and get widespread adoption of IVM and IRM best practices. And And we also want to work with them to overcome technical challenges. So advanced R&D through bilateral partnerships between the partners as appropriate. And this is to find and bring to market the toolbox of next generation vector control intervention. So it's keeping the partners engaged, keeping them motivated, and bringing these tools that we need through to market so that we can get to eradication by 2040. Thank you, Cameron. Next slide, please. So there's a large access component to IVCC, and they've been doing a lot of work around driving access and market shaping to accelerate procurement and impact at scale. So this is really getting products in more widespread use. As I mentioned, we need to expand the coverage of these products to be able to get to eradication. And the access team has been working hard on innovative ways to do that through cost sharing and through communication between countries and procurers and between regulators and procurers, to be able to have understanding of products and also ways to bring not just current but new products to the market that will increase coverage but also combat insecticide resistance. So there's a couple of slides here which are again a bit too detailed to go into with the time we've got, but there's been an engineers program that's been very successful. There's a new nets project looking at the new nets that are coming through over the next well, it started 2018, but over the next 2 to 3 years, evaluating them and looking at operational cost effectiveness and also the how those nets function over that time scale. So we're getting some good information from those that drives the data and the uptake of those products. Next slide, please, Cameron. So we're also capitalizing on knowledge and innovation to address malaria and other vector-borne diseases outside sub-Saharan Africa. So we do have a focus on Africa, but we have recently got some funding from the Australian government, from DFAT, and this is to develop a portfolio of vector control products for Southeast Asia. So targeting Anopheles and Aedes, with tools developed for Africa and malaria. And so this is more really suitable for an urban environment and migrating populations, and addressing regional access and regulatory hurdles. So I won't go into too much detail just because of time, but we're working hard in Papua New Guinea on field and semi-field testing of different tools. And we're looking at forest packs amongst forest growers, these mobile population, and assessing that over the next couple of years. Next slide, please, Cameron. So we also working hard to build and maintain IVCC capabilities and expertise. So this is working with the IVCC staff, building strategic leadership, resource management. We have tech bites, lunch and learns, which are where people come and present and inform and share information. We have ESAC, this external scientific advisory committee, an expert panel of advisors that help us assess technical components of our projects. We've recently rebuilt ESAC that has given it added value to IVCC and its partners in terms of the advice that they give. And we also provide training opportunities for all staff so that they can develop their skills, not just for IVCC, but also skills to develop their own self-development. So we're building a productive team and environment for innovation, product development, and working through challenges. Next slide, please, Cameron. So World Dengue Day. Why do we need a World Dengue Day? Well, I think a lot of people have spoken today really to highlight the importance of this debilitating disease. I'm not going to go into the numbers on dengue, but everyone knows that this is a very serious disease, and one of the viruses one of the main causes of morbidity around the world in these viral-borne diseases. And it's obvious that we need innovation, and it can be in many forms. So, the World Dengue Day is an opportunity to highlight not just the importance of dengue and its effects, but also that we are trying to combat dengue. We are working on it. We are making innovation, and we're working together with not just academia but industry, with the countries, to be able to combat this disease. I have some personal recommendations. So these are my personal recommendations. So take them as you like. But I recommend we do not look at any disease in isolation. Dengue is vectored by many different vectors. Those vectors can live in the same area as other vectors. So Aedes aegypti lives in the same areas as Anopheles stevensii. Anopheles stevensii has recently invaded Africa, giving rise to some urban malaria, and Africa is not really prepared for that. So are there any learnings from vector control in Aedes that we can apply to not just combat Aedes but also stevensii? Climate change is a real issue, and that's been highlighted in a publication recently for dengue spreading into Africa. And we need integrated vector management. We must not think of things in isolation. We must try and integrate as many tools as we can against as many diseases at the same time as we can. So I think being able to highlight that and being able to make people aware can only help. Thank you, Cameron. Next slide, please. And I'd like to thank everyone for listening today. Obviously, we have IVCC has a lot of funders that fund all this work. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, USAID, UNITAID, Swiss, UKAID, DFID as it used to be known, etc. So I want to thank all those organisations, and obviously we partner for impact. So this slide is too busy to go into detail, but it highlights all of the different partners that IVCC works with around the world, and we have a big network that interacts together to develop these new tools so that we can hopefully get to the significant impact of malaria eradication and also other diseases like dengue. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much there, Derric, for that. We're very proud to have you on board our dengue advisory group in terms of the World Dengue Day project, yourself and your colleague Chris Larkin from the IVCC. And we really value your inputs into all of that as well. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Some very strong parallel between your work and the PDP, the Product Development Program, which is kind of the people like the DNDi or Medicines Malaria Venture in terms of addressing the therapeutic gap of novel new therapeutics. And I was just wondering, I'm sure this question will come up, but how much this IP, the intellectual property rights, are going to hold back full-blown gung-ho innovation, if you want to call it that. You've got all these partners. Where does the IP position sit with them? It'll be very interesting to hear that from you. We've got lots of questions coming through.
Oh, really?
Yeah, quite a few questions coming through. So I'll save those for the Q&A, and we'll go to those.
Okay.
If that's okay. But thank you very much for that presentation. Derric, thanks a lot. I'm going to mute you and move on to Thomas Putzer. He's the head of the Base of the Pyramid Group at SC Johnson. Thomas, are you there? Are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, brilliant. So thank you very much for making time. And I'm just going to hand over the floor to you. All right?
Sounds good. Thank you, Dr. Cameron. And thank you, Dr. Derric, too. At SC Johnson, we've worked closely with IVCC over the years as well. And actually, I was looking closely at that last slide to see if our logo was on there, too, and it was. So glad to see that. But hello, everyone. My name's Tom. I'm with SC Johnson. Appreciate the opportunity to join today and share what we're up to as an industry partner, but also to really learn how we can best help the fight against dengue. I'm very intrigued by hearing what we've heard so far, and especially the theme of community that's coming out as well. So we'll give a little overview of who we are, why we're in this space, how we're guided by the people we aim to serve, the human-centered design approach, and some of the tools, what we're specifically doing for dengue control. So SC Johnson, we often get confused for Johnson & Johnson and vice versa. So just to clarify, we are not entering into phase 3 of trials for the COVID vaccine this week. We are involved in some other clinical trials, which we'll speak to, but we're a family company that's been around for about 130 years. We've got operations in over 70 countries and sales in just about everywhere. We're leading manufacturer of household pest control products, and we've got one of the world's largest private urban entomology research centers, which I believe some of you on the webinar today have seen in person too, and can probably attest to that. Few of our brands down below there, you probably recognize some of them, and we've got a few different pest control brands as well. The group that's focused on the work we'll talk about today is our base of the pyramid group. This covers essentially our social impact for SC Johnson. We are focused on disease prevention by delivering affordable solutions that are tailored to the world's poorest 4 billion people, the base of the pyramid. That, of course, is a pretty big niche market, but it allows us to really focus in on the group of people that are probably most at risk for diseases like dengue, like malaria, other communicable diseases. One of the tenets of our work is we try to leverage the best of commercial and philanthropic strategies to ensure whatever we come up with as solutions are economically sustainable. We definitely are very philanthropic as a company, but we recognize that if we can set systems up that allow people throughout the value chain, the supply chain, whoever it may be, to essentially profit off of this work, that's going to help us make larger impact at scale. What's interesting is we're not held to any profit motives for this work that comes out of this group. We're held to ensuring it's economically sustainable and is making impact in terms of saving lives and preventing diseases. I'll speak for myself and be a little transparent here. I'll say when we started up this group a few years back, I was really excited about it. You know, we've got a history of helping people in communities that we operate in, you know, for over 130 years. But I was a little skeptical, you know, what is, you know, a company in Wisconsin, how are we going to really help people in the base of the peer communities? You know, a bunch of yahoos sitting in Wisconsin. And honestly, one of the main things that really resonated with me is our chairman and CEO, Fisk, was almost evangelical about whoever is part of this group, whoever's working in this group is really going to immerse themselves in the lives of the people we're trying to serve. And that's really going to be the foundation of what we're doing. And, you know, this kind of taps into the theme of community that we've been hearing so far today in this session. So whether that means sleeping on the floors of mud huts in Ghana with families for a few weeks at a time, or tapping rubber trees with migrant workers in Myanmar in the middle of the night, it's really trying to understand their lives and what they're going through. And this is just a project in the GMS that we worked on recently on outdoor protection, and just an idea of the range of folks that we actually spent time with and really, you know, connected with. And to take it a step further, in the case of situations where maybe we can't get to, like conflict settings, for example, humanitarian settings, we're working with Richard and his team at Mentor Initiative, and there's places we just can't go, either for safety or political or whatever reasons. We'll partner with organizations like Richard's and rely on his team to really guide us. What's appropriate for the situation? What solution would work best for the people we're trying to serve? So whether it's our end user or whether it's the folks we're partnering with that are really the experts on the ground, that guides the work that we're doing. This is maybe simplifying it a little bit, but I think a few key things we really focus on are trying to make the solutions as easy as possible for people easy to transport. So if I'm a community health worker that's got to ride my bike and take interventions and deep into the communities, let's make it light as possible. You know, let's do some things where we're using the product as the actual packaging or vice versa to really make it easy as possible to deliver. Ease of implementation, you know, of course, a lot of times we're dealing with populations that may be illiterate or may not even have exposure to interventions that would prevent mosquito-borne disease. So we try to make it as simple as possible that it doesn't require professional administration or implementation, where it'd be easy for a community health worker to help instruct people how to use it, and they're able to use it on their own after that. And for the end user too, almost, you know, set it and forget it, so that compliance becomes less of an issue. As long as it's in the room, it's working. In this last picture there, that's a person hanging one of our interventions on the wall. It's a spatial repellent that emanates an active ingredient and essentially protects the space. So once it's hanging, they don't have to think about it. It just works. We're definitely focused on behavior change communication too, where necessary, but we try to do as much as possible to minimize any sort of compliance challenges. As far as some of the specific tools, I think, you know, we're all aware of the amazing impact that mosquito nets and IRS and other interventions have done in the vector control space. And, you know, I've heard a few folks speak about filling the gap that may exist in there. Maybe there's opportunities for other interventions. So we're very cognizant of trying not to do anything that would take away from the impact that nets and IRS have made. We're primarily focused on repellents, both spatial and personal repellents that we've developed with price, duration, and use tailored for end users within base of the pyramid communities. Some of these interventions on the end here, like the mosquito coils or lotion, you may be more familiar with. You know, they're out there and they've been on the market for years. Some on the left end here of the slide, like shield or envelope or mesh, are ones we're developing that are really tailored for these end users with a cost that's comparable to other interventions within the global public health space. And duration too, we'll speak a little bit more about this one, but we've got some that we're working on where we're focused on duration of 6 months or so. It's tricky, but that's kind of what we got on the horizon here, and we're excited about that. As far as the spatial repellents go, or even personal repellents, none of these have a formal WHO policy recommendation yet. We're working on that, and this shield and envelope product are actually going through a series of clinical trials to try and obtain that global public health policy recommendation. It's a long journey, and you know, with funding partners like Gates Foundation and Untitled and our principal investigators at Notre Dame, John, Nicole, and Neil, we've been on a journey for a while, and it's going to take a few more years. And there's a series of trials in here, some malaria, some dengue. I think some good news, VCAG just posted the report, and I believe there's going to be some external communication about it within the next week or two here, but a clinical trial that was conducted in Peru that wrapped up analysis in 2020 demonstrated that shield spatial repellent on the last slide was efficacious for both dengue and Zika with a PE around 34%. And this is cool. We're excited about this in part because there was a gap in terms of the evidence there within the dengue Zika arbovirus space. But also, we know it's a long slog of sorts to reach that WHO policy record. We've got a few more trials to conduct here. The next dengue one is scheduled in Sri Lanka, pending COVID implications. But for some stakeholders, that WHO policy recommendation, especially in Aedes-borne virus prevention and control, isn't necessarily a requirement. And we've got something formal now that's evidence of a safe, efficacious, and cost-effective product, which may be enough to incentivize some level of operational implementation. So we're going to work on that over the next coming months, and we'll see what we can do there. But at least these are our plans towards that public health recommendation for spatial repellents. this is a little interesting too when it comes to tools for dengue control, and it may not seem like something that would impact dengue off on the surface, but we're also partnering with Richard and his team at Mentor and Margaret and her team at the UN Foundation to provide disinfection kits in humanitarian settings, things like disinfecting wipes, disinfecting cleaner, hand sanitizer, to places that are at risk for a lot of communicable diseases, but allowing us to address hygiene, address some of the core foundational wash concerns, in turn allows these places to continue delivering safely diagnostics and treatment for dengue, malaria, or other diseases, especially in the context of COVID-19. So we're excited about the work that's going on there as well. So I'll kind of keep it quick here and wrap up quickly, but our base of the pyramid group's been in place for, we'll say 5 years or so. We've been, as a company, focused on base of the pyramid initiatives much longer than that, but at least over the past 5 or so years, just some numbers there to give you an idea of the scale behind what we've been up to. And we'll wrap it up there. Happy to take any questions and continue learning from you all too, based on your questions and input, what we're up to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. That's some fascinating approach to this, in terms of you're centering on the community, you're listening to them, you're helping them drive the innovative kind of tools that you come out with, the repellents that you come out with. Fascinating. I'm going to bring back Derric for the panel discussion. Is that okay, Derric? You there? Brilliant. Okay, so we've got a lot of questions that have been coming up. I think it might be better if I just go to those questions straight. I was going to ask one question. You mentioned, Marcel, you mentioned the consumer vector control, exploring new business models. Derric, is that in one of your slides? You mentioned that you're looking at exploring the consumer vector control product model.
Yes, yeah. So we're sort of this consumer-centric design, this or human-centric design. As IVCC has been mainly in sort of developing the insecticides for many years, but as those start to come towards products that we can take into the field, there's been a realization that using a product is not quite as simple as you might think. You know, you don't just hand it out to somebody like a bed net. You just hand a bed net and say, right, here you go, use it at night time, and then walk away. Because from a very naive perspective, you might imagine, you know, that's how it happens. They distribute bed nets and then people hang them on their bed and use them. But started to realize that actually when investigators go back and look at them, they find, well, actually, you know, it can be more than 50-60% of the people aren't using them, or they're using them inappropriately, or they're not liking them in some way. And that feedback has been quite slow, I think, to really get back to manufacturers and back to partners to really say there's something we need to look at here in the product design that may help with the function of the product in the field. And I think that's as Thomas was saying with their works, having that information really helps you develop a product that people are going to use, which is what you want. Half the battle is getting the product used in the right way. It's not effective. So why develop the product? Kind of, you know, you're developing something that's no use. So I think that's very important. And IVCC is no expert in this, and I don't claim to be an expert myself, but that realization that it is important, and we are starting to integrate it into our thinking is important.
But perhaps you should both explore a partnership, SC Johnson and IVCC. I was thinking about that thing. What would you like to add to that, Thomas, in terms of you are doing the community-centric innovation? What would you like to, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think Derric hit it head on, and I think sometimes I probably abuse this phrase, but I think we've really learned as a company and as a group to guard against our hubris. You know, I'll speak for myself. I think early on, there was a family I stayed with in Ghana and slept on the floor of their hut for a few weeks. And the mother had a household, came down with malaria. And I was thinking, oh, we got stuff that works. I'm going to leave her a bunch of mosquito coils and she's going to be so proud of me and so happy. And I came in and saved the day. I'm being a little facetious here, but her reply was, you know, thanks, but I got other things to worry about. I got to come up with money to send my kids to school. I don't like the smoke from the coils. It's going to make my kids sick, you know, so keep up the good work, but it's just life. And, you know, we see different variations of that play out, whether it's, you know, I don't like the smell of this personal repellent that I've got to put on my arms, or as a migrant worker out tapping rubber, you know what, I smoke cigarettes and that keeps the mosquitoes away, so I don't have to worry about them. Just a lot of different perceptions and you know, lifestyles that we have to take into account is when we design these products. And a big core of what we try to focus on is trying to make it as either unobtrusive as possible for people or as easy as possible for them to use, so that it doesn't really alter their current behavior, their current lifestyle. And we definitely have spoken with IVCC and Derric's colleagues over the years too, and we've learned a lot from them as well. I thought it was interesting to hear the number of industry partners that have, you know, how it's decreased over the years. And I think it's definitely not a space you probably get into and to make a profit, you know, as long as you realize that going in. And I think there's probably a few companies that can do that. But I think it is really interesting that the numbers dwindled down over the years.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask a question around the communication challenges. You mentioned, Derric, the IRS, the bed nets. I suppose it's part of this same kind of question, really, isn't it? Engaging with the community. But what kind of concrete steps are you putting in to you know, if you're innovating a new product, how integral to the design of that is the communication element of the process? i.e. communication to the end user?
Yes, definitely. So the realization is that we can't just provide a new insecticide and plonk it in a product and then sell it. That's not going to work. We know that. So we have to have innovation, not just around cost and cost effectiveness and you know, how we use those insecticides and present them, but we need innovations in how to get those products into the market, used effectively, and also increasing coverage. So increasing coverage, I mentioned a little bit, is about cost, but it's also about the right way to implement a product, the right way to like product labeling, for example. There's a lot of sort of misunderstanding of product labeling, and how do you ensure that implementers and also people on the ground that are using the product understand what insecticide resistant management actually means.
Yeah.
It means that, you know, in 3 years' time, you should get rid of that bed net and get another bed net that has a different, you know, active ingredient on it. Yeah. So, you know, people on the ground, getting the consumer to realize that is important, but also the national malaria control programs themselves, they need to realize that they can't just use the same product all the way through for years on end, which has been the tradition with pyrethroids. So I think I should shut up there, because I think Thomas is probably more expert than me on this to provide a better answer. But that's IVC's sort of very, very top level view on that, and we do realise that that's important.
I mean, I suppose SC Johnson, as a consumer vector control product company, your communication skills are excellent. I mean, you're out there. You know, what would you add to that? You know, any kind of recommendations on how to communicate? You know.
Yeah, I think I'll probably go back to my hubris point a little bit. Like, you can imagine us as a company we're at our core, we're a consumer goods company, and we sell a lot of products all over the world. So you can probably imagine we spend so much time trying to understand the consumer, understand the psychology, understand how they think, all that stuff. We're just beginning to learn that when it comes to, I'll use the phrase, base of the pyramid communities. Again, they maybe don't represent a typical consumer in a consumer package goods space. They've got other issues they're dealing with. They may not have even seen a consumer packaged good. So for a lot of instances, we're really relying on folks in the communities, whether it be that mother, that head of household, the village leader, the community health workers, I would say, have been as educational as anyone for us in terms of how to communicate. And I think the reality too is it's really easy to look at industry as kind of this, big bad evil, whatever. You're just trying to make money off of me, or you're just trying to give me a product to get my money. And there's definitely companies out there like that. When I tell people we're not trying to make a profit off of our work in the public health space, we want to make sure others do, I think there's some natural skepticism to that, and it's okay. And I think too, just to tack onto it too, I've mentioned Richard's name a couple of times. I'm definitely, you can tell I value his opinion and his team's opinion, Richard from Mentor, but we learn a lot from folks like that, where they've had teams on the ground and they've been doing the work in these situations, these conflict situations, especially too, like something in Borno State in Nigeria, where they know far better than any of us. So even though sometimes we think we're the experts, we're better off listening to the people who really know what they're doing.
Fascinating insight. And I think it's happening all over. It's happening in all spaces, especially in NTDs. So just a few weeks ago, I think 2 weeks ago, the WHO set up their Behavioral Insights Unit. They've officially launched a Behavioral Insights Unit. It's going to work across lots of different diseases, but look at the behavioral traits of people when it comes to taking a new medicine, buying something of this kind. So it's very interesting that it's pervading everywhere into all this space. This concept of behavior, the consumer behavior. It's actually very interesting to add that into the mix. I think we should move to some of the questions that the audience have been asking. So first off the cuff, and this goes back to your removing barriers slide, Derric. And this is from Rebecca Hamill, who's from the American Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, the ASTMH, from Washington, D.C. Thanks for the slide on removing barriers. Would you please address role of national government in providing enabling environment for development and testing? I.e., what is the role of the national government in providing this kind of environment? Derric, I'll field that to you first.
Yeah, thanks. So we've been, part of the development of the field sites in Africa has been so that we can provide that data for national governments, agencies or regulators within the country. We can provide them quality data. And so their job, as long as I'm getting the right organisation here or interpreting what she said, but their job is to procure and to advise on what products to use in a country and to help manage that control of the product. And so we're sort of working closely with many of them around Africa for the development of the new tenabenol IRS product. So there's GLP studies that you do, field studies, to get the information you need to get regulatory and also WHO PQ evaluation. And then there's in-country studies that you do to be able to register a product in country. And so we have to work closely with those agencies, especially in country, to assess the product in ways that they would like, because you can get WHO PQ evaluation, but they may require some extra tests or validation within country. So we work with them closely as well, along with the companies, to evaluate that product. So that's, I think that's
Brilliant.
where we interact mainly.
Brilliant. And I suppose I could ask this to you, Thomas, as well, just from a different perspective. What would you like to see national governments in, let's say, endemic regions of disease or vector-borne disease, endemic regions? Is there more that they could do to provide an enabling environment for development and testing, apart from the GLP issue in terms of bringing that up to scratch?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and one area where I'm really encouraged is in East Africa. We're partnering really closely with the East African community, the EAC, and we've started something up together, the Great Lakes Malaria Initiative, and it's essentially, my poor choice of words, but kind of making it more of a cohesive approach across all countries to try and do something together. So the types of testing that's required, the types of, what's required for each country national malaria plan, just, the different requirements are a lot more streamlined, I guess, for lack of a better description, to make it easier for folks to bring in new products. I think especially for a company like ours, where we're not as prevalent in the public health space yet, but we do want to make an impact. Sometimes it's tough for us to really figure out who we should be working with and what the specific requirements are. I would say, working with WHO and going for that policy recommendation is maybe that gold standard, and we're definitely doing that. And once that, assuming it happens, would be, make things a little bit easier. But in the interim, we're speaking with country governments on an individual basis to try and determine what is required. And I think it's just, it varies by country, and it's tricky. Some countries require registration, some countries do not, and some countries require different types of testing. So there's no one cohesive approach, but I would say when there's regions that kind of get together and make it a little bit easier, where you've got 7 or 8 countries that are trying to do something similar, it makes it easier for us as industry to come in and play a role.
Fantastic. Great answer. I've got another question from Prudence Hamad from the Malaria Consortium. She's asking, how do you assess the environmental and health impacts of a new product, especially when a person may be exposed to insecticide from conception to old age, if insecticides are used on walls, nets in their living environment? How do you assess the environmental and health impacts of a new product given this exposure? So I suppose to Derric first. Go to Derric first. Put you on the spot, Derric.
No, that's fine. I mean, we work with WHOPQ very closely. They have their sort of a process to go through, and they have WHO has its own evaluation of insecticides and their human and environmental impact. So in terms of human impact, it's obviously about exposure to the insecticides, and there's rigorous regulation around that. Of course there is, and there's a complete model, if you like, that works on all sorts of parameters to figure out the effects of an insecticide on a human, so you can assess that in a net, for example. So there's all sorts of regulatory aspects to assessing the safety of insecticides. Beyond that, in most countries have their own assessment and regulations around the chemistries that can and cannot be used, and assessing not just MSDSs, but human impact and environment impact. So from our point of view, that's the main routes that we use for assessing those effects. We do have some research, and we have done some research in the past on things like disposal. So, for example, disposal of bed nets and the effects on the environment of that, how best to manage that, disposal of IRS products, packaging, etc., plastic use, all those sorts of things. Where they're not necessarily a regulatory requirement, but they are something we're very aware of, and we've done work in the past to help to minimize that. And part of target product profiles that we have specific sections on environmental management and safety, human safety and environmental safety.
Thank you. That's a great answer. I hope that answers your question, Prudence. If you want to add anything to that, Thomas?
No, Derric made it easy. He said all the same things I was going to say too. I think I just mentioned that, yeah, we've got teams, a whole department full of toxicologists, and we conduct, full health and human risk assessments, GLP testing, global standards, and honestly, our chairman, and I think our company as a whole, prides ourselves on testing more stringently than what's required, which sometimes makes me pull my hair out because it takes longer to get a product to market, but it's for good reason.
It's for good reasons, yeah. So here's another question. This is from Satish Cherukumali from the US. He's got 3 questions actually, and I'll just ask you them now. So number 1, can the team share insights on the environmental and economic impact from pesticide resistance? Number 1. Number 2, what is the approach for measuring the innovation impact? Number 3, he's talking about his own innovation called smart mosquito surveillance using deep tech sensors and artificial intelligence. There's actually a statement, not a question. How can we integrate into your partner programs? So the first question, can the team share insights on the environmental and economic impact from pesticide resistance? Yeah,
Thomas?
Derric's going to be you again first, yeah.
Oh, why me?
Because if you're closest to my head, you're there. You're next to me.
Derric, we'll switch spots next time, Derric.
Yeah, exactly.
Fine. The next question we'll go to.
I'll have a go. So in terms of environmental and economic impact, I mean, our access team is doing a lot of work on economic impact in terms of how best we can optimize products to get them into market. If we're looking at economic impact from another perspective, there's been a lot of work by Derric Willis and Nick Hammond on the economic impact of the control of malaria, the eradication of malaria. And I know a lot of other people have done a lot of work on the impact of dengue and the impact of mosquito-borne diseases, not just the direct impact, but indirect, DALIs, etc. And there's been a lot of work on modeling that. So I'll probably stop there because I might muck things up if I move that, explain much more about that. But that's a high-level sort of, information where IVCC has been involved in that area.
Fantastic. Thank you, Derric. Thomas, anything to add to that in terms of insights, sharing insights, environmental, economic impact from pesticide resistance?
Yeah, and Satish, we can definitely share something separate from this call too. Happy to get into more detail, but yeah, you can probably guess we model the heck out of that stuff, and actually, again, our partners at Notre Dame have some great modeling they do to help us understand the impacts, economic and otherwise, and resistance being so top of mind for us, we heavily rely on partners and folks like IVCC to understand the right actives for public health usage. This might segue into another question I saw too, but as far as resistance in terms of spatial repellents too, we know that our interventions, at least from what we've tested so far, they work against pyrethroid-resistant mosquitoes, and we've got GLP experimental HUT data against a highly pyrethroid-resistant population of Arabiensis in Tanzania, showing a high level of bite reduction. But the punchline to that is probably we need to keep investigating that head on, and we're going to test impact against disease in Kenya, where the vector the vector population is especially pyrethroid-resistant. So we'll have more insight on that shortly.
And that's a good example, Thomas, of sort of innovation coming from perhaps a different area you might not think of, because we say there's resistance to pyrethroids, so everyone thinks, oh well, we give up on pyrethroids, but that's not true. There's lots of nuances here and lots of continued data and innovation and realization that actually no, there is some some modes of action and some other ways that pyrethroids can still be incredibly useful in the fight against dengue and malaria.
And I think one of my colleagues just whispered in my ear here, my colleague Sukanya made the point that repellents are interesting in this space because the goal is repellency rather than mortality. So it's it's a different framework that you're looking at things here.
Very interesting. So just moving out of that, I think Satish is asking, can he be getting some information on partner programs as well? So I'll leave that for you guys to connect. There's a question on in terms of the alluding to the communication challenge around nets and the correct use of IRS and all of this from Stephen, which is mobile cinema vans, ? Transportation are effective in rural community education on vector mosquito-borne diseases. So he's saying go local in terms of to the community with that education. He's mentioning mobile cinema vans. It's interesting because the Ministry of Health, Pakistan, in an earlier session, were talking about animation that they put out for rural settings, which describes dengue and what to do, and it links the people with an app, which in terms of disease surveillance, they're then pooling that data and getting a snapshot on what's happening. So they're using a cartoon to drive the community to the app, and it's working. And then Stephen's mentioning mobile cinema vans. Have you come across any of those in your travels?
It's funny, we've actually done that as a company in Rwanda, especially. We did some of that with our partners, Society for Family Health Rwanda, and the Ministry of Health there. So it's interesting, and it seemed to resonate with folks. We're still on a long journey to try and determine the most cost-effective kind of communication or behavior change approach to take. I don't know if there is a good answer to it, but yeah, I agree. Like going really local like that and some approach like that the mobile cinema van seemed to resonate.
Yeah. In a past life, when I used to work for Oxitec, developing the transgenic mosquitoes, in Brazil, they had this fantastic van with all these speakers on top, huge speakers, and it drives around the towns announcing news and updating people. And Oxitec produced a song. They sort of communicate in song with the people. So they produced a song about the mosquitoes and about how they work and that males don't bite, educational materials that were fun, and etc. So I do know that can work very, very effectively. And it takes a bit of creativity, and you need, different communities have different communication channels, so it can be quite complicated. But it is probably it is one of the most effective ways to educate and communicate.
The Stephen who asked that is that he's put another statement out saying IVCC's resistance monitoring research can partner with the Northeastern Vector Control Resistance Monitoring Team at Cornell University, in case you're interested. There's something there. Catherine Brown. Yeah. So Catherine Brown has come through with, thanks for the great talks. With regard to the second presentation, Thomas, could you be more specific about what is the intended use of the disinfection kit? For example, is PPE being disinfected with these kits?
Sure. We've got a home cleaning and a professional business at SC Johnson, and we're leveraging some of those interventions. So disinfectant wipes for surfaces, disinfectant cleaner for surfaces, hand sanitizer, hand soap. So not necessarily garments that you'd wear, but interventions that would help sanitize or disinfect surfaces and people, and especially within the context of health facilities within these humanitarian settings, because so many people access them, and so it allows the health facilities to provide care in other areas too.
Fantastic. You guys are getting a lot of love in terms of some of the comments. So Rebecca Hamill saying, my first career was global strategic marketing, Disney on Ice. I despair when the malaria community asks, why does the Discovery Channel Shark Week get so much attention and the malaria community doesn't? Mosquitoes kill more people than sharks. loving the IVCC consumer-centric design and the SC Johnson's multi-stakeholder approach involving all levels, from the BOP community level to WHO. And then thank you for integrating your work with the consumer behavior element. Pairing these two speakers shows how much we can learn from each other. You're getting a lot of love out there. Just a quick.
We need to do, instead of like a Jaws or a Sharknado, we need the equivalent for mosquitoes. We just we'll show that on the mobile cinema van in the community.
That would be something to behold, I think. Yeah. No, but you know, communication is the grand vista that no one wants to kind of go to until it's too late. You know, we have to surely design things around the listening of these communities, and then what they actually need. That surely is a great way forward. But by the sounds of it, you guys are already doing that. I'm being told I've got to get off air because I've got 9 minutes before the next session. We're running over time. I wish we had more time. Perhaps we can explore this later on in the year. This kind of topic needs a lot more than an hour, I think. So I'd just like to say thank you very, very much, both of you, for making the time to present and engage with the audience with some questions as well. Thank you very much, and wishing you the best of the rest of your day. We're going to be moving on to the last session, which is the climate change impact of dengue, in about 10 minutes from now. All right?
Thanks, Cameron.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Thomas.
Goodbye.
Yeah, take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.